one of the things that has to be our top concern is obviously public safety. There can be no excuse. There is no excuse for putting the safety of the public at risk, for blocking ambulances and first responders, for police officers being knocked to the ground off their bicycles in the course of this kind of an event, or for any kind of physical violence to be taking place in our city. I've been working with the city staff and with representatives of the taxi industry and the transportation industry on the ground to find a reasonable path forward that protects our hardworking taxi drivers while recognizing that disruptive technologies are a reality of our modern time, with huge support and huge use by the public. Dangerous and divisive tactics do nothing to address this issue or help our drivers. They don't speed anything up. They don't improve our chances in court. They don't improve decision-making by law enforcement, or for that matter, by decision-makers on an elected basis. These tactics are unacceptable, they are dangerous, and they do a disservice to the drivers, who I know work very hard and are struggling, and should be able to focus on earning a living rather than going about this ill-advised disruption of traffic and putting people in our city, including themselves, at risk. I want to say again to those who are protesting today, we hear you. We are doing our work. We are doing it as quickly as possibly could be the case to create regulations that will balance the playing field. But blocking roads and endangering the public and possibly blocking emergency vehicles, putting police officers and citizens and themselves at risk, this is not an acceptable way to go about voicing concerns. It is not going to speed up the process that is going on here at City Hall. I want to assure the public and those involved in this industry that I ask almost every day how the progress is coming along with the drafting of the new regulations, and I'm trying not to put pressure on incredibly hardworking staff people who are dealing with a very complex problem. But I ask about it almost every day because I am seized with a sense of urgency on behalf of the taxi drivers in particular, but all of those involved in the industry and, for that matter, the public. And I ask questions as appropriate of law enforcement people with respect to the efforts that they make to enforce a law that is very difficult to enforce. And I am satisfied those people are doing what they can. I saw Mr. Moini on television just a few moments ago on CP24 saying, well, if they would just charge 10 or 20 Uber drivers, that would be a start. Well, the fact of the matter is there are presently 190 charges that are pending. And there's a lot of work being done by the staff preparing those charges for court. And you have to put in that time to prepare those charges for court because they're difficult to get convictions on anyway, and there is no point going to court with massive numbers of charges if you're unsuccessful in trying to enforce the law. And so we're doing all of those things, and I am now just specifically making this request. I am specifically requesting of those who are leading this demonstration that took place this morning and early this afternoon, and those who are advising them, to stand down and do not continue this for the time during the afternoon or the afternoon rush hour. The point has been made. I don't think it was made in a necessary or appropriate manner, but the point has been made. And we cannot allow our city to have these kinds of dangerous and disruptive activities continuing on for the afternoon rush hour. And so, and I want to again just assure the taxi drivers and the members of this industry and others who are interested, including the traveling public, that we are in the process of modernizing the city's regulatory environment. The objective of this exercise, as I've said many times before, is to equalize the regulatory regime, make it equitable for all concerned, probably by reducing the regulations on taxi cabs, and undoubtedly by bringing Uber more precisely into regulation. That is what we're trying to do. And so I will just say, please, this is not the way to make progress on this. This is not advancing the issue at all. This is not improving our prospects for a court case. This is not changing a regulation. This is not making any progress at all. In fact, it is something that I think was a very negative event for our city. I heard on the talk radio shows this morning there were people phoning in saying they'd never before thought of downloading and using the Uber app, but after this, because they were in some way adversely affected, they would. And I just don't think I said it before it happened, and I say it now. This is not appropriate behavior in Toronto. This is not advancing the issue in any way, shape, or form, and I'm asking those involved to stop this kind of activity, and to if they would rather spend their time this afternoon as they were doing at lunch, indicating their displeasure outside of my office window, I'd be happy to further understand their displeasure, which I already understand. But this cannot continue.
Realistically, when do you think you would be able to level the playing field so that cabbies are satisfied?
Well, I can't deal with what's going to satisfy them, but I can tell you this much, that our objective is now, as it has always been, to bring forward in the winter a new regulation that is meant to create an equitable playing field, that is meant to create a fair set of regulations for all concerned, and that is meant to make sure the traveling public, most importantly, is protected and has the same protections no matter what kind of a car they get in. And I've said winter. I repeat winter, and that, I believe, is a result of the fastest possible work that could be done by our licensing officials and the lawyers and others involved in what is a very complex regulation.
Mayor Tory, some of your council colleagues, though, say that council made the changes to the bylaw. You could take Uber to court again and try to get an injunction. Why not do that?
Well, when you are deciding whether or not to seek an injunction, I would think that most people in the Toronto public would agree with me that the worst thing we could do is to go to try to get an injunction and be unsuccessful. Because then I think we're in a much worse situation than we are today. We've already had one unsuccessful injunction application, and I remind people of that. Our lawyers are not giving us any advice to the effect that it is in the best interest of the city and being successful in court to seek an injunction at this time. If they were giving us that advice, then I'm sure that people would be carefully considering it and deciding what to do. But they are not giving us that advice. In fact, they're giving us advice to the contrary. And so I would just say to people, please be confident that we are looking at every avenue we possibly can to make sure that we get the work done, first and foremost, on speeding up the creation of a more equitable regulatory playing field so we can help the cab drivers and regulate Uber, both of which are desirable outcomes, and that we are looking at other options. But the legal options are difficult, they're complex, and they are by no means guaranteed of success, regardless of what might have happened elsewhere.
Troy, what do you think people would think about a company who was told by council more than 60 days ago to come into compliance with a regulatory regime, and thus far has shown no indication that it's willing to do so, no indication that it has any plans to do so? What other option does this industry have while it waits more than a year for council to do something about this issue?
Well, I would just say that, first of all, my understanding is there have been discussions taking place between the company and the city with respect to their filing an application to become one of the companies that's categorized under the revised regulation, and that I would hope that could obviously happen as soon as possible. In the meantime, our officials have not hesitated to lay charges under the revised bylaw. That's why I mentioned there are 190 charges pending now. I'm sure there will be more going forward if the status quo prevails with respect to people conducting themselves in the marketplace the way that they are. But I would say to you that the principal task that lies in front of us is to put a new regulation in place. If we had 600 or 800 or 4,000 charges laid out of a universe that is using Uber of 300,000 and a number of drivers that is in the tens of thousands, I don't think it is going to affect our likelihood of succeeding in enforcing the law or winning those cases. And I've previously said that we don't get any advice. We have not received any advice from our lawyers to the effect that seeking an injunction at this time would be advisable for the city. And I have to rely on those professionals to give us that advice in order to decide what to do. And I understand, I've said it many times, I understand the frustration that is being faced by taxi drivers. I often ask myself the question of whether other elements of the industry at other levels who rent the plates out and so forth have made a substantial contribution to lessening that burden on struggling taxi drivers. I don't know the answer to that. But I would say we are moving as fast as we can, and we are doing everything I believe that is possible and sensible and practical in the circumstances to resolve this issue. But in the meantime, even if people are dissatisfied with that answer on my part, it does not offer any excuse for activity that puts public safety at risk, that disrupts the city completely, that puts emergency service personnel either in a situation where they can't do their jobs or where they're at risk. There is no excuse for that.
Why would the city be worse off for trying to seek an injunction? What's the real risk of attempting that?
Well, I mean, I'm a lawyer, and I know that when you try unsuccessfully once and then twice and then perhaps 3 times, there's 2 things that happen. One is that you eventually get the message that your case is not one that is very strong at law. But the second thing it often does in circumstances where you have people that are acting outside of the law, it emboldens them completely to pay absolutely no attention to anything because they see that you've gone once, twice, or 3 times to court and been unsuccessful. And so I trust our lawyers. We have good lawyers here that work for the city, part of an excellent public service. And if they felt that it was in our best interest to be seeking an injunction at this time, again, then I would say that I have every confidence that's what they'd be advising that the city should do.